I've been on to ChatGPT and I've asked it, and I've bought a Skoda Octavia escape car and an MX-5.
Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Collecting Addicts podcast. Amazing, we're still here. We're still using that name, although we will consider other names in the future. I've been saying that for about 2 months. Straight off this week, Formula One. Now, there is a small story lurking but blossoming under the covers that we think is very interesting. We're going to go on to Manish now and ask him about it. But apparently, Felipe Massa is having second thoughts.
So, the closest finish, I think, I guess since before 2021 was the 2008 Brazilian Grand Prix. Unbelievably close ending. But it looks like Lewis Hamilton has just missed out on the World Championship. And then I think with literally a corner to go in the rain, Lewis Hamilton goes from 6th place to 5th place, which is exactly where he needs to get to. And he beats Felipe Massa by 1 point. There is drama in the garage at the Massa family, and the Ferrari mechanics are celebrating his World Championship, only for them to go, no, and watch Lewis win. And it's pouring with rain. And in fact, one of my favorite bits in Lucky is we used the on-car from Lewis, showing him doing all of this, stopping and then just getting out of the car. Lewis Hamilton, world champion for the first time by 1 point. But cast your mind back to the Singapore Grand Prix just a few races earlier, and something sort of strange happened very, very early on in the race. Fernando Alonso came in for a fuel stop. I think was it lap 17 or something, Chris, out of a 70-something lap race. It didn't make any sense. Why would you lose track position at a street circuit on which you can't overtake? You'd have thought, let's go the other way. By some total chance, his teammate smashes his Renault into the wall, bits of debris absolutely everywhere, and it means everyone's diving in because there's a full safety car, and Fernando, when it all shakes out, finds himself in the lead. He holds on to the lead, he wins the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton's on the podium. Felipe Massa, who was leading the Grand Prix for a while, actually came in for fuel at that same Grand Prix. The Ferrari mechanics put their hose on the car. The red light went to green because they had an automated sort of gantry at the time, and Felipe Massa took the fuel hose with him. By the time Ferrari sorted this mess out, he ended up at the back, finished 12th, got no points. Why is this relevant? Because it turns out that Nelson Piquet Jr. put his car into the wall on purpose. And by causing that full yellow and safety car, he basically gifted the race to Alonso and the championship to Lewis. Now,
Hamilton for 7.
So Uncle Bernie has come out and said, look, we looked at this, and obviously it wouldn't have been that good for Formula One, and has left just enough ambiguity in the air for people to think, should we be cancelling that race? Should it have been cancelled at the time? And Felipe has come out and said, well, I think we need to look at a bit of legal act. We need an opinion. I guess there'll be enough cases falling over themselves to review this. But the upshot is this. If by any chance the race got reviewed, if by any chance applying retrospective laws to this, you could get that race cancelled, Lewis would drop from 7 to 6, and Neil would be the unhappiest man on this podcast. Could we be 2 seasons away from Lewis's 8th? Is this
surely,
likely?
can I say one thing before you finish that, Manish? But surely, I'm sure my other learned colleagues are going to say this as well. If World Championships were open to legal argument, then Lewis would probably go to court about 2021, wouldn't he? And say, well, I'll have that one as my 7th.
Yeah. Or as someone rather brilliantly tweeted today, if you decided championships on the basis of who was cheating and who wasn't,
yeah,
quite possibly half a dozen.
I mean, be careful what you wish for. And we're going to talk about that. We may come back to it later if we have time. But this story, which emerged yesterday, kind of overtook it. The question in my mind is, why now? Manish, why has Bernie? I was sad I always felt sad for Felipe. I kind of almost think if the Bernie button or Bernie lever hadn't been pulled in that race in '07, Lewis would have won in '07. And I still think he should have won that championship if Ron hadn't done whatever they'd done in China and keep him out in those old tires. But Felipe made slightly fewer mistakes than Lewis did that year. And I've always felt slightly sorry for him because he dealt with it with great dignity. And he's behaved with great dignity since then. And I was ever so slightly disappointed yesterday to see, because he could have said, it's history. It's Lewis's championship. I had my chance. Life is like that. So I felt sorry for Felipe that he'd almost been put in a position where he felt, well, could I? Is it a possibility? Why has Bernie done it now?
So what happened on Sunday? I mean, we had a Grand Prix which had a very contentious end. And I think that, when these things happen, it's a lovely time just to resonate some of these thoughts. And I think that a lot of people, I do find Twitter a bit of a piranha fest, to be honest. I mean, 2% of it is enjoyable, 98% of it, quite frankly, I can avoid. And Twitter was just absolutely full of Formula One is rigged. They're doing this for entertainment. This is designed for Netflix, not for fans. Yeah. And I think, if you're going to toss a little, not quite a grenade, but a good size firecracker in, it's a good moment to do it. And I think I think it's as simple as that.
Actually. You think he couldn't help himself?
Well, someone went for a quote, and
I think I really worry for Massa though, and I totally agree with Chris Cooper. There was something. I think he built an awful lot of respect from people because of the dignity with which he dealt with that situation. Yeah. In saying that now, having his name attributed to those quotes, for me, undoes a whole load of that. I just, can you imagine Mika Hakkinen doing that? He would just go, wow, I didn't win it. At the end of the day, he walked away with the pot. That's that. And I think there's something old school racerish and full of respect about that. The idea of going back 15 years later and saying, my lawyer says, it's just like,
yeah. When did PK admit to throwing it in the wall?
Yes.
No, I mean, it was shortly after he got. It was shortly after he got fired. So it was actually the following year.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always thought I was going to get a call from Nelson Piquet Jr. because in the 2004 Super Cup race at the Silverstone Grand Prix, I put Nelson Piquet Jr. in the gravel at the old Abbey corner. It's my one encounter with him in the race. I'm just waiting for his lawyers to say, I think we should have that race now.
So on to this week's race then. I said I'd let someone else start, but I'm going to share a few pearls because I've been sitting here on my own for a while. I thought I didn't get up and watch it, so I did that thing where I knew the result, but then I went back and watched some of the highlights. It shows you that I'm slightly falling out of love with F1, that I'm happy to watch it that way. It used to be that if I had the results spoiled, I was livid, but I'm not anymore because I know who's going to have won the race. Unless he's had a massive shunt, I know who's won the race. And I have to say, I thought the first lap was just sensational. It was worth it for that alone. It was full of daring. It was full of skill. It was full of awareness. I know that some people don't think these drivers are great, but they're the best ever. These cars are not easy to drive, and they're vast. They're huge, great big sleds, and they sit too low. So can we just have a general harumph for how great these drivers are? Because they put on a great display. But it seems to me that the system under which they race, the people that make the rules, and the people that administer those rules trackside seem to do their very best to make these drivers have a hard time entertaining us. That's the way I view it at the moment. I just think they're not helped by anything around them. But if they could just have a slightly simpler format, then I think it would be amazing.
Therein lies the core of it, and I've thought about this quite a bit since the weekend. There's a tension that has to be resolved between is it a sport and how do you want the sport to work, and is it understandable, and the show. And I've given this a bit of thought, and it's not simple because under the heading of be careful what you wish for, lots of sports now have a VAR equivalent, and F1's got one, this sort of operation centre in Geneva. The obvious difference between all those other sports and F1 is there's only one ball or thing in those other sports, and F1 is wherever the cars are. So in this race, I think Logan Sargent still hasn't had a penalty for cannoning into Nick de Vries at the last restart, third or fourth or fifth. I've lost track of the red flags. And poor old Carlos Sainz. who I thought was very harsh that he got a 5-second penalty on that restart when and they've all said now the tyres are rubbish. And he got a 5-second penalty. But the 5-second penalty was then applied for a lap behind the safety car. So rather than just pushing him back maybe a place, went back 9 places.
Went to 12th, yes.
Went to 12th from 3rd. And some of you may have heard, there's a bit of thing going on TikTok of Carlos. I thought at first it was a piss take, but no, it really was Carlos sounding utterly broken, say it's not fair, it's not right.
Yeah, but he's been given 2 points on his license as well since.
Jesus, I mean,
he's had his license endorsed. It's unbelievable.
And I think the fuss started with, was the Albon incident a red flag or not? And I think, again, I talked to my boys about this, and they were a fountain of common sense about it. They said, look, it's too complicated. I said last week, one of my chums who retired from 20 years, actually at Jaguar, then Red Bull, that's the 20-year bit. And he said, it's just too complicated. It's not easy to do this. It will take a time. Motorsport UK, I sit on the board of Motorsport UK, we're trying to digitize the Blue Book, which includes simplifying it. It's turned into a mammoth. It's a very, very big task. It's important, but it's mammoth. F1 will be very similar. But unless you start, you never finish it. So it's got to be simplified. So it includes what's a red flag incident. We sort of know what a red flag incident is not. There's no room for maneuver to say, hang on a minute, we all agreed red flag would be these simple things. Anything else is going to run the risk of it's done for the show. And I think in the long run, that will erode the credibility and trust in the sport. This is the pinnacle of our sport. It is the most expert of the experts. And we trade that off for the short term at our peril.
So I agree with all of that, but can I add one thing? We talk about simplifying the Blue Book, digitizing it, applying rules, making sure we know what they are. But the reality is that the sport is too complicated probably to have everything applied to a book, and it's too fast moving. Yeah. The sport worked when there was one individual, when there was one headmaster, and that bloke who used to start the races and was at race control, it worked, didn't it? It just shows you need that human element.
Remarkably, it did seem to.
But I mean, we've had 2 such humans, right? So we had Massey after Whiting. Now we've got Vitic, and I actually think it's a bit more fundamental than that. I think if you look at what happened in 2021, and you have a look at what happened in Australia, I think the absolute pressure on whoever is running the race is to make sure that it's a race. I mean, I'll go to my grave believing that Massey felt he had to end that race somehow such that it was a race and not behind a safety car. Because if they had followed the rules and those 5 cars had gone all the way around, that race would have ended under the safety car. And actually, it would have been the correct result. I know that Max will never speak to me again, but that's the end of that. And just as this race, I think they saw the semi-carnage at the end of Magnussen's car. Yes, there was a tyre and a wheel. They made a decision to go with a red flag, but part of that was, right, we'll have a 2-lap sprint. And what you have is a bunch of guys all clumped together. They're very light on fuel. They've all got new tyres, and they've all got 2 laps to go and make up a bunch of points. And guess what they're going to do?
Go wrong.
But that refers back to American racing, which I've done a few races in America, and the idea of having regular flags and being totally comfortable with a 2-hour race being settled by a 2-minute sprint race or 2-lap sprint race. I'm fine with that. But those vehicles are technically set up to deal with that. They can deal with lower tyre pressures. They're not the cars; those aren't out of balance. A Formula One car that's cooled down like that, and then you're expected to go ahead and drive. No one on television realizes that they're dealing with a vehicle that's totally different. They could use 60% of the brake pressure into that first corner, and it's going to lock up. And how they're supposed to judge that? I mean, for me, it's remarkable that the whole lot didn't just fall off.
Well, that's what Lando Norris. That's what Lando Norris said. He put it on the tyres, but at the end of the day, you've got to lean back and say, "Let's look at the package." You've got effectively a 1-ton machine. It's cold. It's got tyres at 65 degrees. These are brand new wheels as well, and they've got 2 laps to go for it. You've just got all the magic ingredients for an absolute joke ending like that. And it was a bit. I did feel sorry for Carlos, and then when the whole thing shook out, but both the Pink Panthers take each other out, the whole thing, none of that should have happened. Of course not.
Agreed.
No, but who thought it was a satisfying watch?
I did. but I dragged myself out of bed to watch it. I probably thought that opening lap was brilliant, and having the first red flag was a bit of a nonsense. However, it was always going to make for a bit more of an interesting race. I think the second red flag again was a total nonsense, but again was going to have, at least it was going to have an exciting end for, because to be frank, getting up at 5:30 in the morning and watching an inevitable result and just a parade is something I would have regretted being awake for. At least there was some element of stimulation there.
Can I say did anyone notice when Max did get some clean air, he pulled 2.1 seconds out?
Oh, it was amazing.
And I just
on the same lap.
I know, on the same lap. And I just remember, I could just imagine Cristiano going, slow down, don't.
Yeah, and I think the Max's genius for the next 5 races will be not giving away too much. It'll be get far enough ahead, but don't show them the full 12 inches. Just
Neil, say something. Please say something.
Well, I'm desperately worried that we, and maybe I used that we're all turning into those, wasn't the past so much better than the current old farts?
Well, it was, wasn't it?
If I watched that race and I'd never watched Formula One before, it's much more enjoyable than my Formula One. And it's a bit like Bond. Your Formula One is when you were a teenager, let's say, and my Formula One was mid-80s, which, okay, one could look at the beautiful Senna and Prost, and then came Hill and Schumacher and Mansell, but the races probably weren't as exciting. My analogy in my head, which is a bit weird, but hear me out. 1982, Top of the Pops, 7 o'clock. We always watch that Thursday, Top of the Pops.
Yeah.
And it was the best bloody program on TV. And on comes Boy George and Culture Club.
Yeah,
and I'm thinking, this is just fucking fantastic. This is my people. I was 14 years old, and my mum, who was now my age, if I think about it, she was in her 50s. What the hell is that shit music? You don't want to listen to Tom Jones or Shirley Bassey. That's real music. And then I'm thinking, I was a bit young for punk, and I was in a band. I had my Roland JX3P keyboard. I loved listening to Howard Jones. I was a new romantic. And that, for me, was music. And fuck all the old people. And I worry, I'm desperately trying to stay current. It's really difficult when you're in your 50s. But my wife adores Formula One now. She hated me watching that stuff through the 90s and 2000s. She didn't understand it. It wasn't inclusive. She didn't know the rules. She didn't know the people. And my son, obviously, is annoyingly a bloody Red Bull fan. He thinks it's brilliant. So I'm really struggling on my opinions here. But I think
your wife would make a fantastic race director with all of that.
We've got to stay current if we can.
I think, Neil, I totally agree with you. And I do. Obviously, with Liberty and Drive to Survive, you can see these the Middle East events, which are massive shows. They've got all their mates flying in from all over the world just to sort of show off. America and Vegas and Miami are going to be the epitome of the modern sport, and you're not going for the racing, you're going for the party, and there just happens to be some cars running around.
It is entertainment now. It probably isn't a sport. When it was super niche and people died and it was more dangerous and no one really knew about it unless you were really into it, that was probably when it was, in our view, cooler. Probably was cooler, frankly. But now it is a global entertainment.
It's still a sport. It is still a sport. I mean, Frank Williams famously said it's a business apart from between 2 and 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. And I think that is still true. Yeah. I mean, and we've said it, Monkey, you've already said it. The drivers now are unbelievable. I mean, they can get into these cars in their early 20s because they've had so much professional development and training. They're as good as they've ever been. The raw material is whatever the raw material is through the ages. But how that raw material has been developed and what they're like, I think they're now better than they have to be better than they've ever been. And the sport is still, we're talking about it. It's still compelling. We love it.
Oh yeah.
We want to watch the next race. Our favorite race is the next race, and that says we're still fans of the present, I think. But
I hope so. I think we all have to try to stay current.
What is the
with
next
my
race?
with my media hat
Exactly.
on. I've got to say about 10 years ago, Manish will know this. There was if you sat in any kind of broadcaster pitching ideas, or you're talking about what might be commissioned, so many people would say, "Could you just do Anthony Bourdain on cars?" It'd be like, "Do Anthony Bourdain but with cars," and I'd go, "I've heard that 30 times this week, and there's two reasons why I can't. Number one, I'm not Anthony Bourdain, and what he does, I don't think translates into cars."
Yeah.
For the last 2 months, as you might be aware, I've got some time on my hands now. So yeah, weddings, bar mitzvahs, give me a shout. But all I'm hearing is, so we're sort of looking at sort of Drive to Survive angle, and I just go, and off. Where's the off button? I can't listen to this, because I think they've done a great job with Drive to Survive, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I just don't think you could translate it into anything else. And also, I'm not sure I'd want to contaminate another sport with it at the moment. I think it's I think I'd like to get Manish's thoughts on another podcast, maybe about what is the relationship between Formula One and this television show, which appears to have resuscitated it. It was like it was an octopus that gave oxygen, and now it's got its body clamped on F1's face and is almost asphyxiating it. It's gone from savior to cancer almost for me. It's really interesting how quickly these things can change. On that note, we've got coolest racing drivers. Okay, now this can be get my pen up. This can be just because a name sounds cool, and it could be someone that you think's been an outstanding competitor and is not well known, or it could just be a chance to eulogize about your hero. Edward Lovett.
Well, given Neil and his hats, I've dedicated my drivers to the hat they've chosen to wear.
One driver, don't bend the rules.
No, one type of hat and two drivers. Well, that's only because I started playing around with the hats. I've actually got about 5 if you want to know them all, but some of them are on 2 wheels, not 4 wheels. They get cooler on 2 wheels. But there's a famous Ferrari driver called Arturo Mazzario who wears a big cowboy hat.
He's still around. He's cool as hell.
Exactly. Obviously, the cars he drives and the way he looks, he's a cool dude.
Yeah,
he's a cool dude. And whilst looking at him, and the reason I said 2, but Richard Petty. Obviously we're talking about, European drivers. I bet most of us are going to name, but, Richard Petty, King of America, that wearing a big cowboy hat as well.
They went to the same milliner, didn't they?
Say that again?
They went to the same milliner, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Anyway, I need to find one of those hats, Neil, with a Marlboro sponsorship, and you need to be wearing a podcast with a cowboy hat.
Do you think, Chris, in America, you do go. If you're looking for a Stetson, you're going to get your American Yellow Pages out and look for Stetson milliner. It's like,
Milliner.
In Austin,
I don't think that would work.
Cowboy hats.
I had to interview the King, and he is the King at Goodwood about 10 years ago. And as I was interviewing him, he was called off to go and drive something totally inappropriate up the hill. It was one of those Superbird things, the crazy looking NASCAR. And he was walking off, and he had a sort of very old race suit that was tucked inside his cowboy boots. And I said, "Are you going to drive in those?" And he went, "Son, there's only one thing I take those off for."
Okay, that wins.
Yeah, you know what? I hadn't considered him. I think Edward might have nailed it there. Manish, I'm setting the time here for Manish now, because this could go on for a while.
So you all think I'm going to say Senna, but the question was, who's the coolest driver? And I think Senna was cool in his own way, but for me, the coolest driver was Peter Collins by miles. He was just properly cool. Drove for Ferrari, could have been world champion, handed his car over to Fangio. He met and married a woman within a week. Yeah. He met Louise King in Miami. 1 week later, they were married. He brought her back to Maranello. They lived on a yacht in Monaco, which had basically 23-hour parties. It doesn't get cooler than him. And he was awesome. Bernie actually just said about him, the drivers were cool back then. It was a pity social media wasn't around. And then he said, and they were good-looking guys because he's incredibly handsome.
He's a good-looking guy, yeah.
And he was an unbelievably quick racing driver. And I think people kind of slightly forget that, and consistent. And he, I mean, I did write a script about Price. I ended up doing a lot of research about him. And what a lot of people don't know is when Dino Ferrari was dying, he was dying of kidney failure as a consequence of his muscular dystrophy.
That's right.
And he lived in a little apartment above Maranello, and Peter would go and see him every day, every evening, and tell him about the latest movies, because of course Dino couldn't get to the cinema. And after Dino died, Peter really did become a bit of a surrogate son for the old man, for Enzo. And he actually lived in that apartment for a while as well. I mean, it was very much the heart of Maranello. He should have won the Mille Miglia in 57. I mean, he could drive anything very, very quickly, and he didn't win it for mechanical reasons. But he was the kind of guy who would go into Bologna, go and find a perfect trattoria, just meet a woman, sit and chat, and the next thing you know, they're making love, and then he's got a race to run somewhere. I think if there's cool, there's really cool, and he was the coolest.
Superb. Sounds a bit like Edward Lovett in the mid-2000s, that. I'm going to go for Neil Clifford. Come on.
Okay. Well, for everyone listening, you can guess. I'm going to list the things that this amazing guy has done, but I'll always start with the hair. I think you have to have fantastic hair. Now, if you lose your hair at 26, you spend the rest of your life having hair jealousy. And so this man has got wonderful hair. He also had fantastic sunglasses. This was a man that has survived the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and actually even maybe into the 90s racing. This was a man who had the fabulous race suits with the Hoya badges and the...
Oh, I know who this is now.
I know who this is.
The very infamous blood group, which one always needs one blood group on your race. Best crash helmet. Google Le Mans 78 and the Porsche 936 and have a look at that crash helmet. It's the most fabulous crash helmet. He raced for Formula One in Tyrrell, Ferrari, Lotus, survived them all, which were all bloody death traps in those times. He won the Paris-Dakar in a G-Wagon. He won the Paris-Dakar in a G-Wagon, a G280. He also did the Paris-Dakar in a Lada. This is a man that's done the Paris-Dakar in a 959. He grew up in Belgium. He is from Belgium, which I'm sure everyone can now guess that. Therefore, he's the king of Spa. He raced everything and won everything at Spa. I think he was 20, winning races in Lotus Cortinas around Spa in the wet. I mean, you can't get any cooler than that. Actually, if anyone's going to the members' meeting at Goodwood, you should be there on the Sunday at midday, I think. There's the most incredible Lotus Cortina race, the Jim Clark Trophy, which is all Lotus Cortinas. And there's Franchitti, Shaw, Chilton, Soper, Mass, Pirro, Nadal, Chandhook, Blundell. It's the most incredible race of Lotus Cortina. So please either watch it live or go to bloody members meeting. Anyway, this guy's won Can-Am. He's won Le Mans 6 times. There's not many people won Le Mans 6 times. And he was finally the manager of the Mazda win at Le Mans in 91. He was the guy that actually made and led that team to win Mazda. So it's Jackie Hicks. He's the coolest dude that's ever raced the cars. Raced everything, still alive, looks still cool. And one little story: I chased the Mille Miglia from Brescia to Padova one night. I was midnight with my good mates. We were waiting for the cars, and these things travel in time. So you've got to wait for the boring 20s cars and the boring 30s cars and 40s cars before all the cool shit arrived. And there was not one car had made the journey. And then we hear this rip-roaring noise of this beautiful little Porsche 550 RS that had obviously overtaken all of the cars to get there first, because he was knackered and wanted to get into his hotel room. And out jumps Jackie Hicks in his late 70s, in his race suit with the blood group, lit a fag, had a fag, and pissed off to bed, spoke to no one. That's what I call a racing driver. So Jackie,
his the
mate,
hair is a really, I mean, he is really. There was a photograph I saw recently of Jackie X and Jackie Stewart, somewhere quite recently. I think we circulated
that
said,
hair.
and we said we hope they're looking old. We don't want to look any older. And
He still looks cool.
I think Jackie, he was covering the watch on Jackie Stewart's wrist, obviously being a big rollers guy, and he's a Chopard guy. And I thought about, he had amazing eyes, Jackie X.
Very
I
big.
Oh, come on, it's the smile. It's the shape of the smile with Jackie. The most distinctive shape of smile.
Very, very, the eyes and hair. And I thought about eyes, and when you think about what makes a driver cool, and I told my boys about this, do we mean the coolest person who was a racing driver? Or do we mean racing drivers who are really cool? And it could be either of those. So Francois Sever had the most amazing eyes and smile, and he was clearly a cool guy and
most handsome man ever.
I mean, just impossibly. He looked like he looked like he should have been in the Grand Prix film. He was extraordinary. Yep. And how would we remember him have changed if it hadn't been for Watkins Glen in '73? It's so sad. When you think about eyes, you think, actually, I think there's a case to say Paul Newman is the coolest racing driver ever. Because he was really cool. He was Cool Hand Luke. And he was quite a cool guy. There was quite a good interview with him on the TI website a few years ago. And he obviously had the most amazing eyes. But we think that there's a bit of naughtiness about the coolest drivers. So when you pull that thread, you know who you end up with? Who's the coolest racing driver?
There's only one.
Pablo Escobar.
Okay.
Oh.
Again, he raced a 935.
Yes.
Who knew?
Yeah, he did.
He raced 935. And then when you come back from that, you end up with Don and Bill Whittington, 1979 Le Mans winners, with Klaus Ludwig in a 935. Not long after that, they enjoyed hospitality at a Supermax somewhere in the US because they were big-time cocaine smugglers. So I don't think they're my coolest drivers, but that's kind of where you end up. I think it's Jackie. I mean, Stefan Beloff.
Yeah, lovely.
But I think Jackie, that's a great eulogy, not great celebration of who he is, and I think that's brilliant.
Incredible man.
Yeah,
I can't disagree with any of those. I'm a huge Jackie X obsessive to the point that I bought one of the Chopards many years ago, the second edition.
That's the only watch I've ever bought. Yeah.
And I had I didn't have much money in the pot, but I spent all of it on a Jackie X, and I absolutely treasure it. And I took it to the launch of the Mark 7 Golf GTI. I took the box, the instruction thing, because they told me Jackie'd be there, and he does if you've got his signature, it's very distinctive. It has like a big smile in it, and he signed it for me and everything. He's also a philosopher prince. He was obviously profoundly affected by Africa and his experience of racing there, and he married an African wife, and you get him talking about it, and you just think, you should be running the UN, mate. You're one of those people that could fix anything. So he's on my list.
Chris Cooper's got to be yours, hasn't it, Chris?
It could well be, actually. Chris Cooper wearing his tighty whities in round 2008 was a bit too much for me.
Chris, before you tell us your final one, just a quick X story. We used to run a charity event every year or so at the Hexagon dealership where we'd invite people. There was a theme, and sometimes they'd come, sometimes they wouldn't. Jackie came. We did Le Mans, and Jackie came. Derek Bell was there. We also had Mark Blundell there, showed his wonderful lap. But when Jackie arrived, this room, which was humming, because we used to get everyone as drunk as possible before the auction, and it was all for Great Ormond Street and the children's unit at the Brompton. So, I'd be there sort of putting chairs out and things. That's the kind of event it was. But we always did it very well. Anyway, he came, he walked in, absolute pin drop silence. And he spoke. When he spoke, people were just leaning forwards, listening to this man. Somebody asked him a really random question. They just sort of said, so I'm a massive fan of 80s motor racing, and they talked to him about Senna a bit. And you remember Jackie's the guy who red flagged the Monaco event, and that's why
Yes.
Senna came apparently second. But they didn't ask him. They said, you did that. He said, what did you think about that Senna-Prost accident, the really fast one that happened in 1990? And he just coolly turned around and said, are you a racing driver? And this guy went, no, he's just a rich Ferrari owner. And he said, unless you're in one of those two cars, it's really not your position to judge. This guy just sat
I'm
down.
going to use that next time.
That's
we
brilliant.
It was
That's brilliant.
unbelievable. And then just before he left, we actually did quite well. We raised quite a chunk of money. Classic Jackie Hicks. Just before we leave, we find an envelope. I can't tell you how much he donated, but let's just say he left silently donating what was about a fifth of what we raised that night in one check.
Wow.
That is who this guy is. Amazing, man.
He's he's absolutely the one. Okay, he's on my list. I mean, I've got a very long list here, and I noticed I didn't write this initially. It was racing driver, not rally driver. Rallying's more my thing, so I can't list my rally drivers. So I've lost a load there. I've got by cool. Chris Cooper's right here. What's the definition of cool? Cool, you could argue, by definition, means they didn't achieve that much. Because cool people are the ones that they operate on the fringes. They get things wrong. They're flawed. And I think quite often it's flaws that we look to in sports people to make them more magnetic. So by definition, they need to be a bit of a failure. But I don't my heroes, I don't like to be that much of a failure. So I found that quite difficult. And I went round around the houses about this, and I couldn't quite work out where I was going to get. Because actually, if I wrote down what a cool racing driver was, I came back with the word Nigel. And I don't think that the audience would allow me to say that Nigel Mansell was the coolest racing driver. But there's something about a man who can have a photograph taken with his new company car that's an F40 with a tash and a tweed cap that makes me think, inversely, he's the coolest man ever born. The size of the berries you'd need to have to allow that photograph to be released must make you the coolest man on the planet. But it can't be Nigel. And it can't be Emo, despite the fact that he had the best sideburns ever and is, by all accounts, and I met him, the most lovely, lovely, positive man with the surname Fittipaldi. So I'm going to come back to my definition of a cool racing driver, and that is that if you see a photograph of someone and it has to be a still for me, not video, in autosport or motorsport, and you just see this image of an individual leaning against a car and you go, fuck me, I want to be you. I just want to be you. That's what a cool racing driver is. And there's a picture of Henry Pescarolo leaning against a Matra,
He's a
in the
dude,
70s, with a beard on. It's everything for me. I don't care whether he won the race. I don't care whether people liked him or not. But Pescarolo leaning against a Matra, that's it for me.
He's Mr. Le Mans.
He just looked effortless. It just looked effortless, didn't it? Yeah.
So we're now going to move on to, and that's why I love the way that these things segue so naturally, into what's your favourite steering wheel? Jesus Christ. Oh, God. You know when you do technical and those little union things that you'd use? I want some of those for this podcast because I can't find a way.
Is it what's your favourite steering wheel or what's the best steering wheel?
Oh, for God's sake, Edward.
Well, it matters. It matters.
If he was the best, what's your favourite?
Would you want to be driving a AC Cobra with a 1966
AC? Have you seen Twin
with some massive steering wheel?
Right, stop for a minute. Mr. Lovett, you're going first here, but for the rest of this podcast, we're going to call you Ed because we know you like it so much. Go on, Ed.
Come on, Ed.
Name down here. Fuck off. I've got about 6 steering wheels again. Is that right?
No.
Go on.
Well, first of all, I've said surely a WRC steering wheel has to be the best steering wheel because the way they need to use it means it needs to be a pretty solid piece of
steering. Yeah.
So anyway, but I'm not going to go with one of those. Alcantara steering wheels on a brand new car. They're lovely things. I think, Chris, in the first ever podcast, I can't remember what car you had at the time, but I think it might have been a E63S or something like that with an Alcantara steering wheel, but you use the word mung in it. And if you buy a used Alcantara steering wheel,
You have
Not
to
really
it's
replace
not the
it.
most pleasant thing to have. But I remember 996 GT3 RS steering wheel,
Mm.
brand new Alcantara. That's my choice.
That's a cracking choice because it's got a thin rim and not too much padding.
thin
I
rim.
mean, there's going to be some language that could offend people over the next few minutes, but it's got to be a thin rim.
Yes, and afterwards, can we talk about what time the when a BMW M3 steering wheel just got too fat?
Well, we can talk about that with the E46 M3. No, Clifford, tell us about your girth.
It's quite thin, but very elegant, and there's no buttons. I think anything any steering wheel with a button needs to be thrown in the bin. So no buttons, big enough that because I'm not a driver, as we know, I'm a useless bloody driver. But you need to see all the bloody dials. So it's as much about the visibility of the dash than it is the steering wheel on its own. Lovely soft leather. I'm not an Alcantara guy. I think you're right, Ed. If it's new, it's fine. But secondhand, you know there's going to be bogies behind there. It's going to be just a tricky thing. You've got to replace it immediately. So I'm not Alcantara. My favourite steering wheel is the F40 steering wheel.
Ooh,
It's the king of steering wheels.
beautiful steering wheel.
It's got
Even
the
though-
badge. It's got just the horn. You can see it. You can see everything. The positioning from the seat is lovely. You can see all those dials. The F40 steering wheel is the best steering wheel.
Oh, God, we've peaked too early here.
Well, you say that.
Oh, God, here we go. Cooper's chiming in. Wait there, and go.
What makes a good steering wheel? It's got to look good, it's got to feel good, and it's got to steer good. To steer good, no discussion about this. The sort of the spokey bits, they've got to be horizontal. They can't be like that. They've got to be like that. And I think there are two in my life. Renault 5 GT Turbo. I lusted after that car.
It's a great
because
steering.
the spokes were like that little divots there. But the epitome of that straight spoke steering wheel, late 1980s Momo F1 steering wheel. Flat spokes, perfectly positioned. Because, to drive, you've got to hold the wheel right there. If the spokes are like that, you can't do it. Rest on the spokes. Momo. There's loads of pictures you can see on. Everyone can look. Google late 90s, late 80s, McLaren F1, Momo steering wheel. That's the one. Perfect.
Can't argue with
substitute.
No,
Can't argue with that. Manish.
I found two, and they are actually in some ways quite similar. The Ferrari 246 Dino steering wheel. Thin rim of leather, basically just flat aluminium, few holes, the word Dino in the middle.
holes. Yeah.
That was it. But the thing it's got those 6 little bolts that you do with a lovely hexagonal Allen key, just beautifully around the word Dino. And actually, it's kind of wooden analog, the E-Type Jaguar, the wooden steering wheel that one had. It had the multiple holes with Jaguar in the middle, and I just think those two are the most beautiful thing.
Yeah,
the Jaguar is slightly more
E-Type is good.
Drilled ones, that's right.
It's wooden, the wooden one.
Yeah, such a pretty. I'm having dinner with a friend tonight.
Did Nardi make that?
Was it a Nardi steering wheel? I don't know. But I'm having dinner with a friend tonight who is an unbelievable consultant radiologist. He does cardiothoracic radiology. He used to run the Hammersmith Hospital, Mary's, and Charing Cross. And he's an unbelievably good driver, Chris and Edward. And he built, when you're a registrar, you sit these massive exams, which just take up all of your time, and everyone's terrified. You don't sleep. He did his jobs. He was doing his registrar exams, and he built an E-Type Jaguar. He rebuilt an E-Type Jaguar. He didn't do the body. It's the only bits that he didn't do. It ended up on the front of Classic Car because he doesn't do anything badly. And he sold it a while ago, but he kept the steering wheel, and it's in his garage. And I love touching it.
Chris, have you got wood?
I've got. I haven't got any wood here. That's a good question, Edward. A neat little segue with a cheeky little bit of humour in there as well, Edward. I like that. Your hosting skills are really improving. Now then, I haven't actually got anything there. However, I've got about 9 to go through. So first of all, the prototypo, the Momo prototypo is it's like the benchmark wheel for me in a Porsche.
Yeah.
It works, and
Yeah,
now they've
okay.
got decent dishes in them. I think that's got to be up there for me. We at this point need to Google the Maserati boomerang wheel.
I've got it here. I've got it here. I looked at it. It is a joke. It is an actual joke.
It's just so magnificent that I love the idea of the wheel as theatre, which is why I love some of those single spoke Citroens. Our CX GTI is just bonkers. When you look at it, you think if you had a light impact, the whole wheel would you just go forward into the dashboard. So I love all that stuff. But I think, and I also think that there has to be something said for the latest wheel that Richard Tuttle's done. He's a mate of mine. It's not an advertisement plug, but go and look at the dished wheel he's just done for his cars. Edward's got one on his green car, and that is a sensational steering wheel. I'm very disappointed you didn't mention that, Edward, given that you have daily contact with such a piece of art. Maybe you're hunting for a discount on the next vehicle. But there's a wheel that actually I've shared with a man in this room that I think was pretty much perfection. It was made by OMP, and it was a 997 Porsche Cup car. And it confirms everything that all of you said. It confirms that Alcantara should only be used when it's new, otherwise it's full of other people's DNA and is a bit grim. That you should never have buttons on a steering wheel. So one season, I think from 07 to 08, as the Cup cars got faster at the Nürburgring we were racing, 2 buttons appeared on the steering wheel of our racing car, and I thought, God, we're fucking here. I've got buttons on my steering wheel. Everyone wants buttons. One of the buttons said radio, and one of the buttons said drink. And I came into the pits after my first 3 laps in the car, and I flew into the pits. No. One of them said pit limiter, one of them said drink. That was it. I flew straight past the pit limiter, having a drink, and I realised that I really shouldn't have any control over buttons on a steering wheel because I couldn't coordinate either of them. Nor the radio. But I associate steering wheel is the most emotional part of a motor car for a driver. It's your main point of contact that you see. And I have so many memories of looking at that wheel, my hands on it, and what the car was doing. That that car's for sale at the moment. And I just want the wheel from it. I just want the wheel from it.
Yeah, I think if a car's got the wrong wheel, you want to get rid of it. A 964 Turbo 3.6 has got a shit steering wheel.
Yeah.
Or even a 928, frankly. Brilliant car.
Oh, come on. That wheel's great.
No.
928's good. 928's good. Actually, I've forgotten quite how emotional I was about the wheel in that car. That's absolutely right. Because it's the thing that gives you confidence.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it moves with the whole binnacle, that's amazing in a 928. But the actual steering wheel, I don't rate in a 928.
Right, lads, we're going to move on now to your favourite car advert, okay? Favourite car advert.
Yeah.
I'm going to go Chris Cooper.
Yeah. So I got 2. The 1986 Renault 25 advert. It is, if you were playing Thatcher's Boomtime Britain Bingo, no one's ever said that out loud before, then this is the advert we're in it. It was David and Joanne. They had a lovely leafy country house. Their young son, who was learning a musical instrument, who went to a lovely, presumably public fee-paying school. He was clearly a professional gentleman of some repute. And they're driving home from the school one day. And he says to her in this sort of 1980s kind of voice, "It's time for a change. Jim's with me, Hugo's with me, Jasper's with me, and we've got the backing."
That's the line. That's a killer line.
And Joanne says, "Oh, David, you're so wonderful." And they get to the crunchy gravel bit when they get to the end. And actually, it makes you think, I quite like the Renault 25. It looks actually quite nice. V6 engine, quite nice. And he sort of shuts the door and he says, "But there'll have to be some changes.
The mirror falls off.
Company car is going to have to go." And she says to him in this beguiling sort of way you couldn't remotely get away with it, "Oh, don't be so hasty, David." And you think, it's a fucking Renault 25. Google it. Renault 25. It's just
Chris,
brilliant.
I'm watching it now.
Chris.
I want to watch it now. And of course, the great irony is that the one car they wouldn't have bought as a family would be a Renault 25.
I mean, just
Sorry, Manish, carry on.
Chris, I wanted to say that was Rosalind Landor who played
Yes.
Joanne, who's unbelievably good looking.
Yes.
She sounds like this. So aren't you being a bit hasty about the car?
That's the one. That's the one. We've both been watching the same kind of stuff on the internet, but we'll leave that conversation there. The other one, very
I'm a
quickly.
big Renault 25 fan. The 30, that was quite a special thing, but the 25.
What's killing me now is I want to go and watch these immediately. I don't want to carry on talking shit with you lot. I want to go and watch these.
The best website to watch adverts on is called hatads.org. It's got all the adverts that you will ever see.
We're going to put the URL up for you now, so you can go and watch. And that is a URL for ads, nothing else. Now then, Neil, what are you going to go for advert wise?
I've failed again because I'm going Japanese.
Oh yeah!
Fucking Japanese. I can't get rid of them. It's the Honda Accord.
I've got that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Why have you gone for Cog? You can't have gone for Cog.
Cogs.
Oh, fuck off, Neil. Do it again.
All three of you.
Cogs. There's been numerous great Honda ads, actually. There's plenty of them, actually. But the Cogs, which was, they used all of the bits of a Honda Accord. It's 2 minutes long, with this amazing, piece of magic with every single bit of the car is disconnected, and then it's.
We'll play it in its entirety now.
It's beautiful. There's no words. Immensely clever. 2 minutes.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah.
I can't argue with that, Neil. Edward, have you got a backup so that you look like?
I have got a backup only because I think we're all probably. It's hard to remember these ones, so we were probably all delving deep into YouTube to find something. But there's a modern Fiat 500S advert where the guy's throwing his handbag on, and they're doing the sort of testing in the thing, and he throws the handbag on, slams the door, and kicks the front. They're like, what on earth is he doing? And then they cut to see his girlfriend slamming the door, and this old woman on a cross throwing a handbag on the bonnet. Yeah, it was quite.
We don't condone any of this.
No.
It is quite funny.
Those sort of stereotypes don't exist on the Collecting Addicts podcast.
I did the first one I actually Googled to go and see if any of them were any good, because I've got the memory of them, is the old Nicole Papa. But to be honest with you, they're all crap. They were good then.
Did you ever see the send-up of the Nicole and Papa advert? I think it was Mel Smith. Exactly. Yes. He's driving, he's curb crawling, and his daughter's a prostitute. It's pretty good, Nicole. Papa.
Not the 9 o'clock news.
Yes.
1 second, hold on. Come in, but I'm just finishing this. Sorry, my better half's just turned up. I've got to be out of here in 20 minutes because the cleaner's coming. I don't realize how much we've gone on. Right.
I'm surprised we haven't done the golf Mark II.
Oh, look, I'm coming in now.
We've got to hear it.
The golf, I'm not sure about. In fact, I want to hear Manish first, then I can work out what I'm going to say. What's Manish going to do? Come on, I want to know. I'm not going to go first.
Both Nicole Papa and the Renault 25 trilogy were on my list, but I think the best car ad, at the time, it was just unbelievable. 1985, it was directed by Tony Scott, and it was the Saab advert. It was just unbelievable. Fighter pilot walks into a hangar that says Saab. Bloke in raincoat walks in. You see a Saab Viggen up front. You see, I think it was a Saab 900, wasn't it, from the front? And then basically it ends with the two of them coming at you. The Saab Viggen actually flies over the Saab car. And the tagline's so perfect. It's just Saab. Nothing on earth comes close.
Yeah, we all wanted a Saab after that.
I wanted a Viggen, not a 99. Yeah.
Okay, so does this affect some of my choices? It's always difficult going last because we all think so alike that you end up with the same content. I think there's two. For me, there's a Ford Escort advert from the 80s, which adverts, to use Neil Clifford's reference, are a bit like James Bond. You know, when you're at that period in your life when you sit and watch far too much television because your mum and dad are out or whatever they're doing, you've got the babysitter in, that's what you do. And I just remember that one where it was Ford's advertising agency could just nail British society. And he starts off with a proud father of two getting into his Escort. And then there's a bloke, some boy racer. It's actually an RS Turbo in a forest. Why he's in a road spec car in a forest, I don't know. Then there's a policeman polishing his Escort, which is a police car. And then brilliantly, to tug at the heartstrings, the local GP gets in and puts his bag on the passenger seat. And then he pushes the cassette in and it plays Lovely Day, which is just one of the great tunes, isn't it? And I just, that's what advertising is about. Tugging at the heartstrings of the population. That's peak advertising. But I think we have to mention, don't we, BBH's Golf GTI advert with the woman that walks out of his house and throws the. I think
who was it, Chris? Who was the lady?
Paul Hamilton.
Oh, that was it. It was Paul Hamilton.
I can't think of a smarter piece of advertising that can exist as a metaphor for the time in which it was produced. It just, for me. If you said to me what were the mid to late 1980s, even if you didn't like cars, I'd give you that advert as what that time was about.
It's a winner.
That's what great advertising does. So I'd go for the Golf one.
Winner. Very good.
Now then, today's two-car garage. I've got to read. These have become so long. I've got to read it out. Here we go.
Oh no, it's not that long.
It bloody is, and you wrote it, Neil. For a man of few words, you're remarkably verbose with your fingers. Okay, here we go. That's not a Nicola Sturgeon gag. Here we go. So today's two-car garage. There's a £50,000 budget. You're a senior manager in a digital marketing agency moving out from Islington with your wife and young child. That's important. I know that's important with Neil because he's a cheeky fucker. I know that. It didn't say children, it said child. For schools and garden and a double garage, and can now finally admit to a love of internal combustion engine cars. So before it's too late to enjoy them, they need a family car for station drop-off, school runs, M&S weekend food shopping, and a two-seat sports cabriolet for pure driving enjoyment. Wait for this bit, in the Chilterns.
Yes.
Okay, Neil, this is your challenge. You're going first.
Right. It's all about the engines. This guy has spent his whole of his career since leaving, I don't know, Exeter University or something, to he's been on the bloody tube, he's been on the bus, he's been riding down the Holloway Road, fucking getting almost killed by buses. He's desperate to admit to loving cars before it's too late. And he wants a V8 and he wants a V12. He wants a V12. So how do you get a V8 and a V12 for 50 grand? Well, the first thing you do is you go and buy a Maserati Quattroporte. Series 1, the pretty one, the Pininfarina one, the 4.2, the shitty gearbox, no one really cares. Handsome as fuck car, beautiful thing, practical, shopping, there's a boot, 15 grand. You get a great one for 15 grand. Actually, there's for 10 or 12 grand. Actually, it's a one-owner green car, an auto car for 15 grand. I'm tempted to bloody email the bloke. It is fantastic. And then he's got 35 grand and he needs to get a V12. What do you get with a cabriolet V12 for 35 grand? You're all shaking your head.
Don't do it yourself. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's a DB9. It's a fucking...
It says, Neil, actually enjoy driving.
No. He enjoys the sound of an engine. He's like me. He doesn't really know what driving is. He can't tell the difference between a good car and a shit car. He just wants an amazing V12 engine.
Yeah, you're right. Knock yourself out.
In the back for the child.
Okay, I've got two observations here. One, Neil Clifford, it seems to me that you saw a classified advert for a good value Maserati Quattroporte and then built this scenario around the fact that you'd seen
I started with V8 and V12 because he knows 2030's round the corner. Is going to be too embarrassing for him to have fabulous cars in a few years' time. So he's got to tick both boxes.
I also know a man in this group that had a DB9 Volante. And I can tell you now that I asked him the following question. The racing assembly words. I said, "Is it shitter than you thought it was going to be?" And he replied, "Much."
The good news is on that car, I found somebody to bid me the most extraordinary used car price for it. And that person's also in this podcast.
Oh, lovely.
Edward?
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
Did I buy it?
Yeah, you did.
Have I still got it?
No, I think not.
You probably
Yeah.
have, yes.
Is that around the back with the B5 Alpina?
Probably.
No, but it's when Astons were pretty. It's when
They
James
were.
Bond, before
So
they
I
went
think you're
ugly.
Right,
BB9.
so, hold on, we've only got through one of these. Edward Lovett, go next.
Right, well, you're all wrong. Well, not many of you started yet. Chris, I know you're still using your 330D X car from. Anyway,
it's in France, yeah.
we're talking about a guy from digital marketing here, so obviously he's very au fait with his online world. So, and he's a busy guy, and obviously he's moving. So there's a lot of work moving house. Something I don't recommend doing. So he's obviously gone on to ChatGPT and just said, "Look, I've got 50 grand. I've got one child." And can you choose 2 cars for me, please? And one of them just needs a convertible. So I've been on to ChatGPT and I've asked it. And I've bought a Skoda Octavia estate car and an MX-5.
God, you've still got a job. AI.
Anyway,
shit.
I've realised after I've moved in and I've bought these 2 cars, which ChatGPT told me I had to go and buy for my 50 grand, I've gone and part exchanged them both. And I've bought a Defender and a Z1.
Yes,
nice.
like that. Like
That's
that.
right.
It's 75 grand though, but never mind.
I think you probably can't do that. I know you might be able to. Manish, what are you going to go for?
I thought he might be a little bit of a closet design person. He had a bit of an aesthetic. So I also thought he would. There was with Neil. There's always a hint in the question, isn't there? And it was his love for the ICE. So I split his love for the ICE into love for design. Don't worry about the ICE. Love for the ICE. So I had a quick look, and I could see some rather wonderful Jaguar XJS cabriolets.
Ooh.
V12 for about 25.
Did you just use the word XJS Cabriolet and wonderful in the same sentence?
Yes, I did. They all look really beautiful. I'm sure they only go.
Nice one with you. Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful looking car. I really do. It's a great car. I always wanted to be the Saint, the second one, Ogilvy, and I think it's the convertible version of that. It'll be beautiful. You can stick your son/daughter in the back, and it's a little cramped. Huge, great bonnet. For £25,000. Actually, weirdly, I thought 25,000 would just about buy you the 3.6, but no, it'll buy you some reasonably nice V12. So I've no idea what percentage of its time it's going to spend in the garage. I don't know what this thing will be like on a very twisty country road, but it looks beautiful. And then the other thing, I actually thought a Citroen CX Palace.
Oh.
And I found one in Sweden. Oh. And it's absolutely mint. And it was £25,000. And the guy said he would direct you if you were seriously interested in relatively cheap flights to Stockholm. And then he'd pick you up in Stockholm to show you the car if you were serious. And the interior, I just forgot, it just looks like an 80s drawing room.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everything's just, even the roof is just a big furry rug.
We could buy that and we could all drive it back.
At this point, we should mention that collecting cars is big in Sweden, and that car should be on our site, Edward. So can we make sure it gets there?
It probably is. He probably found it on there.
No, honestly, I didn't. I really didn't. But no, they'd be the 2 cars. I could just see those in the garage. It just looked great.
That's good calls.
Chris Cooper, now we've revealed to the world that you did buy a DB9 Volante with your own. I'm not sure we can listen to anything that you say seriously again. Carry on.
He flipped it. So.
Yeah, so Neil's right. You need a V8 and you need another V8. So, and I love TVRs. So TVR Chimera.
Oh, God.
18 grand. It's nice to drive. It's got a V8. I'm not quite as close to the Chilterns as Neil is, but I know what they look like, and it is possible. That's about 18 grand. And for about 32 grand, you could get a 2016 C63 wagon.
Yeah.
What's not to like?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a nice mix.
Yeah. Not as cool as the CX, I have to say. I mean, I'd probably go for the CX.
I wouldn't want to use the CX regularly, but I think it's a lovely car. I think that's a good twosome, but we need to get you some therapy or some sort of ointment for this TVR thing you've got going on.
Yeah, whatever. All I can hear is a droning noise right now.
It's the same as a scrotal rash, isn't it?
Is it a whining noise? It's one of those two.
I don't know what it is.
There it is again.
I've gone at it a slightly different way because I think Neil was talking earlier about trying to remain relevant and be in touch age 50, and of course this is a lovely thing he's posed here. But I think the reality of having young kids, I've still got one left, and Edward's got a couple, is that whatever car you buy that you think is going to be the thing you go to the station and back in is what you'll use the whole time. The toy car you've got for the weekend, you will never use. It's fanciful. So I've gone the other way around. I'm going to spend a small amount of money on a really cheap Series 2 Lotus Elise. In the fanciful dream world that I might ever get to drive it, because I'm always going to be going on a Saturday to drop the kids to play football or to fight with their children other mates on a Sunday. And whatever I'm doing, I've got people with me. So basically that thing is never going to get used. But when I'm having a dinner party or being middle class, I can tell people that I've got a Lotus. So I'll look interesting and engage in the subject. But ultimately, it's just a static object. What I am going to buy is not far away from Chris Cooper's car. I'm going to admit to liking a small SUV. I think the GLC 63 AMG, the proper one, looks mega. And if you've driven one, it's a really surprising car to drive. They go like something off a shovel. They're four-wheel drive, unlike the one Chris is talking about, because they end up in ditches quite a lot. And I think GLC 63 AMG, with all the toys on it, done a few miles, would be a fantastic car. And I don't think you'd end up driving the Elise much.
Good noise.
If you were a consultant of the type that you said. So it's a little bit different, but I think we've reached similar answers, wouldn't you say?
Well, in Buckinghamshire, if you turn up in that, they think you were a pharmaceutical distributor of some sort.
Well, I mean, look, myself and Manish are struggling with that one anyway, aren't we, mate? Yeah, so whatever happens, we're either working the Tandoor or selling the powder, aren't we, according to you?
Go with it. Yeah, go with it.
So here we go. So I'm going to say it's time for some music after this marathon cast. Manish, start off with something civilized, please.
Last week, Richie Sakamoto died on Tuesday. I absolutely loved, yes. He died of cancer. He was 71 and an amazing musician in his own right, classically trained, absolutely beautiful on the piano. He sang, he composed with David Sylvian in Japan, but he also had the Yellow Magic Orchestra. I mean, you name it. Nussendor, he's worked with everybody. So he died, and the song that I remember him for, the piece of music I remember him for, is Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence.
I was just going to say that.
The most beautiful piece of music.
Yeah.
And wonderful. It was re-recorded as Forbidden Colours with David Sylvian, but Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. I will be listening to that in my car.
Beautiful. Lovely song.
I think I'm just writing these down. I always write down Manishes because I can't get enough of them.
Yeah, I love that one.
Neil, what's next?
I spent 1997, I think, to about 2012 living in Muswell Hill in North London. And the coolest house in the whole of Muswell Hill was called Fairport. And I had no idea about this house until I discovered a song relatively recently. I think it was on Desert Island Discs or something, by the Fairport Convention. And this was a band that started in the late 60s in this house in Muswell Hill in the garage. And there is one song which I promise you, if you listen to and you don't get emotional and wistful and your heart rate changes a bit, you need to go to the doctor because you're probably dead. This is called Who Knows Where the Time Goes. And it's the most beautiful song, straight into my Desert Island Discs.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Wow.
Have a listen.
Lovely. Yeah. Right, and that's going straight into my playlist for later on. Edward Lovett with that's Saki, isn't it?
Saki, yeah, this one.
There you
go. Overnight by Parcels. There we go.
That's a good tune. Very good tune. Yep, that's a very good tune. Chris Cooper.
I've got one more advert for you. If you Google, it's a Toyota Australia advert for the new, more powerful Hilux. If you Google Toyota Australia Bagger.
Yeah, it's really good. I'll give
Right,
you that one.
okay.
So the song, it's a cliche, but you know, Billy McCluskey here in Palm Springs for NBC Sports, Yellow, the race.
Yeah.
You've got to be on open road for that, because otherwise you just go like you're on the way to a race. But I love it.
I'm a huge Yellow fan. You couldn't listen to it when I was at school because you were considered too uncool. But
A bit weird.
now no one cares, and you can enjoy it for what it is. It's fantastic stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm not pretending to be Manish here, but one of the things I love listening to in the car with my children is great film scores. I just think that we're magnetized by them. We just think they're great fun, and we all hum along. And John Williams is obviously the main man when it comes to a film score for me. If you go onto YouTube, he conducted the Vienna Philharmonic a couple of years ago, and all of these things are on YouTube, and they're well worth watching. But when he does the theme tune to Star Wars, there's a lovely moment in it. First of all, the sound is so good; you can't believe it's being played live. You're thinking these people are so good. This sounds like the film. I could be watching the film. But there's a moment where clearly someone, I think it's a French horn, I can't remember. There's a guy playing a French horn. He's clearly the greatest French hornist in the world. He's the shit at this. And he's played everything from Beethoven, Mozart. He's played every great piece of music. And he looks up to his mate and he gives this, how cool is it that we're playing Star Wars in this amazing opera house in Vienna? And the look is so gorgeous. You have to watch it. It's John Williams. You Google John Williams, Vienna Philharmonic, Star Wars, and you'll see this guy. He gives it this. Oh, this is the shit.
I'm going to watch it.
It's something, and then you go down the wormhole of Jurassic Park, and you listen to them flat out. Listen to them in the car. It's great. It is great driving music, all of it. That was a marathon. I'd like to say a big thank you to my co-conspirators, Manish, Pandey, Edward Lovett, and Saki, Neil Clifford, and Chris Cooper for contributing yet again. And the way things are, we might be back for a 13th, but Lord knows what might happen between now and then. Stay well, stay safe, and it should be time to get some cobwebs and mouse shit out of your old cars now. So go out there and go and see how many wiring looms have been eaten over the winter. Goodbye.